Hey everyone, it is George Couros. Welcome back to another episode of the Innovators Mindset Podcast. And I might be taking on a little bit of a controversial issue right now. But before I get to that, I want to just start off with a thought. When you disagree with people, find where you agree and then move forward from there. Okay, so I'm going to say that again. When you disagree with someone, find where you agree and then move forward from there. And I think about this all the time because sometimes, and one of the things I talk about in Forward Together is one of the most important skills is really listening to lead. The idea that you want to ask questions, you want to understand a person's perspective and understand that. And it is about finding some commonalities and then building bridges from that place. So with that in mind, I'm going to get into the question of this. Does class size matter? Controversial. Now, if you have taught in a classroom, you know it does. If you are teaching 25 kids and then it is up to 35 kids, you can show me all the data and all the other stuff. It is harder. It's way harder. Everyone knows this who's ever taught a classroom. If you add a bunch of kids. Now, the results might end up being the same because you're putting in a bunch of extra effort and you're putting in a bunch of extra time through that process. So think of it, this is the best analogy, and maybe this is the worst analogy that I could think of, tied, the same, is let's say you're a juggler, and you can juggle 3 balls. You're juggling 3 balls, and let's up it to 5, okay? So you can see that I'm actually doing it, but it's harder. Make it 10. Now, I might be able to do it, but it's very complex to do it. 3 is a different thing, and we have to kind of say, like, what's that number? And let's not make it balls, let's make it like flaming torches. And it's like, let's not do 3 flaming torches, let's do 10. So I think that's where, if you have taught in a classroom, you know this. But that is something, anyone who's taught knows this, but there's research that maybe shows something different. But we will talk about that in a second. I'm actually going to go away from the question for a second. I blogged about this, and I kind of want to talk it through. And it's because I saw something, and it's weird. The weirdest thing sparked this thought in my mind. Francis Suarez, who was the mayor of Miami. So he is a politician. And honestly, I know of him because I do live in Florida, but I don't know his political affiliation. I honestly don't know. And it's different with mayors. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe it isn't. I'm still new to this country. I don't know. But he posted something on Instagram, and I'll link it down below. He was actually at Alpha School. And Alpha School, very different than, maybe a traditional school, the process. And if you are on social media, you probably have heard of Alpha School. I'm not going to talk about Alpha School, but it is something that he wrote in the caption of his visit that really stuck to me. And it was this. He said, "Great visiting Alpha Schools, Miami. Impressed to see the vision Joe Lehman," I don't know who Joe Lehman is building. This is the part I'm really focusing on. "Schools should also teach grit, public speaking, financial literacy, and entrepreneurship." That was what sparked the class size thing for me. So I saw this, and let's just talk about this last statement. Schools should also teach grit, public speaking, financial literacy, and entrepreneurship. I will tell you, I've been involved with education for 25 years. I don't think I know a teacher that would disagree with that statement, that they would say, like, hey, school should also teach grit, public speaking, financial literacy, and entrepreneurship. Yeah, hey, we totally agree. I don't know your political affiliation. I am so for this. And so that's where the class size discussion, because let's get into this a little bit, why I'm bringing this up. And probably this is, what I would call like an 80-20 belief, right? Like 80% of people agree with this. Like, does everyone agree with it? I don't know. But, I'm really big on literacy, numeracy. Those things are very fundamental. And again, 25 kids versus 35 kids in elementary class, it's going to be way harder to teach it. The foundational things that we've always taught, some of those things really need to be continued to taught. But also, where are we trying to go? Financial literacy, grit, public speaking, entrepreneurship. Love it. So as I'm kind of going through this, and I'm looking at this, I've seen this idea of there is an old research article that actually showed, and it's been cited several times. I think it's actually from 1998, and it basically said class size has no impact on learning. That was the research. And anytime you hear the class size discussion on, no, it doesn't matter what the size is, they'll often link to this specific article. That's what they will link to. And so let's go back to the caption. Schools should also teach grit, public speaking, financial literacy, and entrepreneurship. So this is a vision of where schools need to go, of where we want schools to go, that the majority of educators, the majority of politicians, the majority of school leaders would agree with this statement. But then what we're actually doing on the other side is saying, hey, let's look at the past and let's look at what we've always done and base how we're going to fund schools, how we're going to go through this process and base it on the past. So we want something new in the future, but we're going to base our funding decisions on what has worked on the past. And this is actually, I remember Katie Martin said this, and she's a very good friend of mine. And it always stuck with me about how basically she talks about the idea of how we cannot, we have to understand there's always a new context that we are dealing with, that we look at best practice, but we also have to understand there's a future that's in front of us. And the first thing I thought of is basically what is being asked of educators is we are saying, we want to give you a blockbuster model of education. And through that process of Blockbuster, we need you to create Netflix. We want you to do the things that have not worked in the past, or the things that we are basing stuff on in the past, but also create a totally new product. And if you're not familiar with the Blockbuster Netflix, Blockbuster basically, no, people don't know this. I wrote about this in Innovators Mindset, over a decade ago, is basically people said, Netflix came to Blockbuster and they said, hey, we are interested in purchasing you. And Blockbuster said, we're good. We don't need you. And now I think there's one Blockbuster, and it's not necessarily a place where you rent videos. It's more of a museum. People go there for nostalgia, that process. But Netflix is, we can have that argument probably. And this is the thing I'm noticing. All the things that have disrupted old industries eventually will get disrupted. Uber disrupted the taxi industry. Now Waymo is disrupting Uber, right? And so this is something that we have to think about. So the reason why Blockbuster felt they were good and they didn't need to move forward is because they looked at their sales from the past. They looked at what was working in the past, and they weren't looking toward the future. And again, that's where the class size discussion is. You can cite the research activities. You're saying, hey, we want this new thing, but also here's the old model. So if you look at education, if you are lecturing, if you're simply lecturing 35 kids versus 50 kids, and lecture is the main process of what you are actually doing, maybe class size doesn't matter, right? So let's give it there. Let's just say that, and just for a sake of argument. But if you want entrepreneurship is not like a class you just teach and basically it's like, hey, there is very personalized stuff. When you're talking about financial literacy, people have different goals, things. So there has to be some personal element of that. So if you're telling me, hey, we can do that en masse, I would actually disagree with you. So I think kind of going back to this, and maybe you don't agree with me on this too. And I think what I'm trying to do is bridge is instead of talking about let's look at the research, maybe we need to talk about where do we want to go? That's where we want to go, because we agree with this. You're asking us to go into this direction, but you're not necessarily, but you're basing the structure on what we have done in the past. So again, schools should also teach grit, public speaking, financial literacy, and entrepreneurship. Yeah, totally agree. Most people would agree with you. Are we actually creating something based on the past? And what I wrote in this article is this: if we want schools to teach different things than they have in the past, then we have to focus on what would best support the process, not complain that schools aren't preparing them for the future based on the thinking and actions of the past. There is so much agreement on where people want to see schools go, but we have to align vision, mission, and metrics to support it. There are many things from the past that still matter, and I list traditional literacy skills, but we have to act differently if we want different results. What we expect from schools has changed, but the structures have not. And maybe this isn't just a class size thing, controversial topic, and maybe it's not that. It is about, where do you agree? where do you agree, and move backwards from there, instead of having the conversation about like, well, this research study, well, I actually am in a classroom, and this, it's kind of like you're fighting against something, but it's like, maybe where do we want to go? Like, where do we want to go? And we agree on that. We actually agree on what we were trying to do. When you disagree with someone, whether it's class size, whether it's anything in education, find the places you agree and then move forward from there. Because I think it shows that you're willing to listen, you're willing to like find those spaces and build that together. That to me is why I wanted to bring this up. It's not just the classes thing, it's about how we approach each other. Whether, when we disagree on something, find the places you agree. And that really takes listening and hearing what people say and then building from there. Just something I want to share with you. I just kind of had it on my mind. That was really interesting. And I think that's would be great for school. And that's what we want to actually build towards. So how do we get to that place? Anyways, just want to share that with you all. If you want more of this, I really highly encourage you to check out Forward Together. Very proud of this book, and it is about finding those commonalities so we can move forward together. Title of the book. Anyways, I hope you have a wonderful day. Thanks for all you do. Take care.